Welcome to Fast Friends, the podcast that centers on high performance storytelling with high performance athletes and individuals whose norm is to live at the very top 0.01%, whether it's competition, coaching, business, or life. We dive into their stories, how they got there, the journey, and life on the other side. I'm your host, Dan Walsh, and I'm joined by my co host, Justin Faber. Justin and I were rowing teammates in college and later on the U.S. national team. Though we went on separate journeys, since then we've come together to bring these stories to life and share perspectives with our audience as well as our guests. Welcome back to Fast Friends. Today is, I know I say this every time, but I'm really excited about this show. We have what I like to call an OO coming on, an original oarsman. Peter Raymond is by far one of my favorite characters in the story of American rowing. Not only for the person he is, but the oarsman he is. But when I was doing this project for the National Rowing Foundation, I got to interview him and his crew for when they got inducted to the Hall of Fame. And Peter, I think that might be the seed that planted this idea in my head that has grown to this show. And on top of which, that your daughter Mariah Raymond is one of my closest friends, and especially the fact that your son-in-law is one of my teammates, Matt Snowbrick. When I knew it was going to be an awesome show, because he texted me and said, my father-in-law has an episode before me. And I said, hey man, you got to talk to Odin before you talk to Thor. So I'm really excited to have you on. You are a treasure trove of information. You're an incredible athlete, an incredible professor, incredible father. And I really appreciate you making the time for us. Thank you.
Um, I'm very honored to be here, and I'm looking forward to this a great deal.
So to bring you back to why you're here, Justin, who is again our coxswain with the most, is going to give you a little hype up reel to remind you of some of the accolades you come from the past. Justin, fire it off, baby.
Yeah,
Well,
no. So, Peter, again, thank you for being on the show. Um, to introduce you to the audience, I have to say, I, I, we got a bio from of you, and I'm like, all right, well, where can I condense, because there's a hell of a lot of accolades that I got to figure out how to do it in a succinct way. Um, but I'm just gonna start with, you're from New Jersey, from Princeton originally. You have a big family. Looks like you're one of eight. And then kind of grew up on a sheep farm, which we'll probably talk about, in Princeton after moving from a part of New York back to Princeton. And then, looks like you were um, really well situated within both academic as well as athletic pursuits. Obviously went to Princeton, studied English, played hockey, you rowed. We'll talk about all that. Then you were a two-time, then you were an Olympian. Then you went to the Naval Flight School. Then you were a coach at Navy. Then you were on the Team USA national team, where you were a silver medalist in Munich. Then you went on a bit of an adventure lifestyle through France, where you were a ski lift operator, where you were in the Pyrenees, you were a truck driver. You got married. You taught a lot of English over the years at probably all of the most prestigious prep schools in New England. I don't have to name all of them, but we'll probably talk about it, from Tabor Academy to Belmont Hill to, Green Noble Greenboro School. So, a lot of coaching mixed in there. And then, I think the other bits were that, you were, the U.S. quad coach in Yugoslavia, and as well as, the lightweight coach at Harvard. And then a lot of different, really awesome academic pursuits, Harvard School of Education. And then, a lot of English, teaching and kind of tutoring. And then it sounds like you are a really big cyclist as well, which we'll probably talk about too. So I mean, overall, like, I don't need to drain every bit of it, but all that to say, I think that, we're really psyched to have you on. We have an amazing guest on for our audience who has a unbelievable background and wealth of knowledge. And then on top of that, is a really accomplished writer. And so, Peter's got a lot of scripts under his belt as being an author, a couple novels, some novellas. So, certainly some really cool, pieces out there that he's authored, and then a couple that are underway. And I think the biggest testament to your bio, and again, it could go on for a while, which is awesome, is, we heard from your daughter. We asked her, okay, if you were to write a bio, the first thing she wrote, which I think is an incredible accomplishment out of all these accomplishments, is he is the best dad. So that obviously sets the tone really well. And I think that the other piece is, she goes on and says basically you have a really big presence and a really big energy that radiates, which is obviously super attractive, and obviously brings a lot of great conversation, which we're excited to kind of, shift into. And then the other piece too is, that you're really good beat by your own drum is to summarize some of what you wrote. And that it's super awesome. And again, like, I think in retrospect, she really appreciates that. So welcome. We have a lot to get into, but I can't wait to dive into some of this. But again, incredible background, and obviously, I'm sure this could be an incredibly successful storytelling show for us. So can't wait to jump right in.
Thank you, Justin. I got to see, it's really funny. I'm sitting here at the four of these guys looking at me, say, "This is a little unnerving."
It's equally as unnerving for us. So
I had to
worry.
remember to look at the camera. I was following along with the bio. I was having fun reading along with Justin.
Oh, I can't wait to see you two Tigers get into it about Princeton, and maybe the differences there. But so Peter, I like to cut to the chase, because like that is an incredible bio, but you wouldn't have such many accomplishments if we didn't know where it started. And we'd love to know, what was your call to adventure to the sport of rowing?
I'm going to start off with a problem, because nobody ever believes this, and I think you will, because I heard you guys talk about this about yourselves. I was a lousy athlete. I have three younger brothers who were all, on any metric, better athletes than I was. Hand-eye coordination, just unbelievable. Football, hockey. So I grew up in a world. I went to all private schools, all male, my whole life. That'll come back to talk about that. And I was not a good student. I never did well academically, even in high school, and even in Princeton. It wasn't until I was in grad school that I had any sense of myself as a thinker. So you're looking at a guy who, and then I think I was just put this down right now, because I think it says a lot about who I am. But I, as you mentioned, Justin, I came from a big family. 7 boys and my older sister. The brother who was just a year older, less than a year older than I am, his name was Sticky, and he was a bully, and he bullied the hell out of me until he was killed in an accident at 9. And I think that has had a huge effect on my relationship to men, my relationship to peers. I can see it pop up really easily, and I've never felt comfortable with peers. I think that's one of the things that, see, you guys are looking at me and said, "Oh God, here we go again." So that was very powerful. So he was very smart. He got even though he died when he was in 4th grade, he had straight A's, and he was a really good athlete. So he was everything he was my nightmare in lots of ways. So he died, and a lot of the things the way I have made sense of the world for years and years were very close to that event, but it's still with me. So when I got sent away to South Kent School, boarding school. I was a year younger than everybody in my class. I was very late maturing anyway. And then my first semester there, I grew 3 inches. So I was 6'4" and about 160 pounds. And I was absolutely useless in everything I did. I couldn't even walk. And I'd love to say we had to play football, we had to play hockey, and in the spring you got a chance to choose your between rowing, tennis, and baseball. On baseball and tennis, forget it. I couldn't hit anything. But when I remember playing football, I played in and I'd run out for a pass, and the inside of my knees were just completely bruised from my kicking myself. If you take 5 hangers and tangle them together and shake them, that's what I was like. I had no ligaments, I had no muscles, I had nothing. So football terrified me. So I went out for rowing, and my best friend that I formed a relationship before rowing, a guy named Porter Broughton, and I rowed together, and they put us in these barges, and that's all we rowed the first year. Mm-hmm. And we were undefeated. I'd never won anything in my life. And then we rowed again together into the next year. But it wasn't really until my senior year when I was playing hockey, and well, I should back up, saying football, they put me on the varsity. Now, this is a school of 120 kids. And this is not a big school. So I made the varsity, but I was the only guy on the team that didn't have a number on his jersey. And that's smart, you know? They're really smart. I did not play 1 second of one game. But anyway, something happened in hockey, and I, for some reason, discovered how much fun it was to clobber people. I played defense, and then I just see these guys standing in front of what I consider to be my cage, and I just blindside them. And I had never experienced contact where I wasn't doing more damage to myself than to other people. So I would say that was the beginning of my development as an athlete. But that spring, I rowed in the first boat with Porter Broughton again, and it was very intense. We took it very seriously, but we also recognized that we wanted to have fun because everything had been almost draconian. The culture of the team had been just, everything was deadly serious, and I can't be like that. And I think I get that from my father. My father had a capacity to be silly that I have emulated my whole life. So that's really where it began. And you may be interested to know, the final race was at was at Quinsigamon. And the boat that beat me, we were leading the whole way, and then our stroke caught a crab. And Monk Terry was the stroke of the Middlesex boat that beat us. That son of a bitch. I'll cuss about him later on.
I feel like Monk's gonna come back. Monk's gonna come back. So,
yeah.
And Peter, thank you for sharing that with us. The passing of your brother is not easy, no matter how many years pass. So thanks for sharing that, and definitely defining and definitely having that type of older brother energy is tough, right? It's tough, and I really, you paint such a beautiful picture of the 5 coat hangers, and I want to reassess the we're not staring at you, we're looking up to you. We're looking up to you first and foremost.
That's even scarier.
It is, right? Because for the people that are listening, it's like, yeah, it's a bunch of crazy. It's the inmates running the asylum, and 2, to maybe give an empathetic bridge. I wrestled, and my singlet was loose on me, so I know the feeling of feeling like those coat hangers.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the courage that it takes to still try and go out there, even though spandex that's supposed to be tight looks baggy. So
Yeah,
we're with you, man, all the way.
I
Yeah.
sense that.
So
I appreciate it.
Yeah, Steve, you were about to say something. I cut you off as usual.
Oh no, that's okay. I mean, I was just observing that it sounds like it started out as the reluctant adventure of rowing through all that. So where does I guess where does the story, when it comes to the rowing adventure, where does it start to hit fast forward? I mean, I think I don't want to. Obviously, we share a little bit of a Princeton legacy, but I don't want to gloss over that. If that's I know Princeton in those days was fighting to be relevant. Where does the story hit fast forward?
It's a good question. Well, freshman year, I still weighed, I think I weighed 165 pounds. And Dutch Schock was the head coach then, Fred Schock's dad. And I walked in and I was not recruited. I walked into the boathouse and I was really excited. And he looked at me as if I were a bug. He said, he just totally dismissed me. And I remember being really hurt. But I rowed a few times in the fall in some of the varsity boats when they needed a person to fit in. And I ended up stroking. I was a captain my freshman year. But strange thing happened. My arms started cramping up. I couldn't feather. And I didn't know what was going on then. I now know that it was nerves. It was a kind of a panic attack. I was just really became frightened by the responsibility of stroking. And so I got moved to the sixth seat. And I want to tell you flat out, the absolute worst experience of my life was the IRAs my freshman year. It was a 2-mile race. It was probably 95 degrees and 98% humidity. And I don't know if you know this, but in those days, we did not drink water. Did you know that?
Take a salt tablet, right?
Did you know that?
It made you weak.
We could not take water in the boat. And I know 5 strokes into that race, I knew I was in serious trouble. And it was the worst experience of my life. So this is not where the fire began. This is more shame and humiliation. So I had to give away my shirt to the Navy kid. And I was walking from the boathouse to the finish line to watch the varsity races. At that weekend, Syracuse was having its big prom weekend, its big party weekend. So here I am, go all these nothing but male schools my whole life, and I'm walking by these guys and got all these girls all over the place, and so it was incredibly hot, as I said before, and I was carrying my T-shirt in my hand, just sweating, and I could not have felt worse about everything until some guy yells out and says, I'd put that shirt on if I were you. That was the nadir. That was you could hear my soul hit the concrete. That was the worst. So anyway,
so can you do me a favor? And because I think we're in this interesting phase where we're heading into the Olympics in LA, which is incredible because it's a US Games. And that's just, the magnitude for us athletes to have a home games is just incredible. And, but the distance has changed to 1,500 meters. And when you were at the IRA, was it still a 3-mile race into that narrow where it was shot from a cannon?
It was shot from a cannon.
Okay.
Literally, they had. It was such a disaster. Yeah, it was 3 miles, 16 boats across. And I tell you, it was pretty amazing to sit in a boat in the middle of 16 boats. And one year I was in the middle. We were in the middle, and the cannon was about 2 boats over. And when that thing went off, that's how they started us, with a friggin' cannon. But then our senior year was 1968, so they rowed 2,000 meters for that.
Okay. Because that always sounded like one wild regatta, like 16 boats running and rowing to a narrow. If you're lane 16, like the cannon doesn't sound as loud.
It wasn't a narrow. No, there was not a narrow. It didn't narrow down.
Oh, well, then somebody lied to me. So thank you for clearing it.
No. In fact, let me see. What was it? Junior year. It was still 3 miles, and there was a massive thunderstorm. It was, what do you call it? I should know, I'm a sailor. What do you call it when squall? Absolutely black sky. I just looked up. I said, "We are going to die." We were paddling out to the start. I said, "We're going to die," and all the varsity boats sank. So we all had to get the boats in. But the JV got hit during the storm, and Navy. I love this story. Navy coxswain, nobody could see anything. The referees were all drowning. Navy just went right off the course and went into the lee of the trees, shot down along the shore, and then scooted back into their lane to finish and won.
That's amazing.
Not private.
That is
It was really fun. Yeah. So, but when we got on the stake boats, the difference in some boats were a full length ahead of others' boats, because the stake boats have been blown all over hell and gone, and they just said, "Fuck it, go."
Wow.
It was crazy.
Well, then Dan, your question really hits it on the head, right? We're talking about, well, what was it to take 500 meters away? And Peter, you're saying that between junior and senior year, they went from 3 miles down to 1.2 miles. So what was that transition like for the team? Was it met with resistance? Was it encouraged? Did you guys feel good about it? Did the training change? Like, what was that transition from junior to senior year like?
Well, we were relieved because the 3 miler, if you're dehydrated, is not a great experience.
Mm-hmm.
And we weren't trained well. We weren't in great shape. So often in the middle of those races, things got really, really ugly. And so, the transition was pretty straightforward. Just rode at a higher stroke. And by the time, by my senior year, I had matured a lot. I was still not a good racer, though. When I was listening to Karen, is that her name? Karen Davy?
Karen.
Talking about, well, she was, in order to make this boat go, she was going to have to really destroy herself. I had a different approach, and that was I could feel what was going on in the crew as stroke, and if things started to fall apart, I felt that if I took it up, things were really going to fall apart. So I unfortunately really limited our crew by that. I should have said, "Look, we're going for it. And if you can't keep up, that's too bad." But I always had this sense of what it should feel like. And when it felt good, and I pushed that as hard as I could. But then if it started to fall, and a lot of college crews are limited, and it doesn't take more than one person to limit what was going on. I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway,
Peter, can you talk quickly though on the sequence that you mentioned as far as your freshman year? You're humbled a little bit with the whole shirt exchange, but you still had hockey. Just reading your bio, you still had hockey in the presence, right, of your athletic, repertoire. What persuaded you to just stay rowing and not say I want to just keep on the hockey track? because it looks
Well,
like you played hockey for 2 years, but you rode all four. So
Especially because you
Right.
liked hitting people. Yeah,
especially
because you
since
liked hitting
it
people.
sounds like your athletic kind of launch pad was the defenseman mindset in hockey.
you'd think, but I did not like the relationships on the hockey team. It was
Okay.
very hierarchical,
Got it.
and I did not experience that on the crew. You know, it was, and we can talk about this now. I think it's a good time.
Sure.
My best friend from Princeton, Don Marsh, his nickname is Goldie. Goldie and I have talked about why is it that after all these years we're still frigging talking about rowing? You know, what is that? It's just bizarre. We keep talking about rowing, and I think part of it, to me, is that there's a mystery to it, and trying to understand what makes that sport unusual. And I think, and you probably have all thought of this yourselves, but the striking thing to me about rowing is that in a lot of sports, you can have one guy who's an unbelievable hockey player and he can score 30 goals and you got a great team.
Yeah.
The boat is too damn heavy. You can't do that rowing. And I love the story. My younger brother rowed at Princeton. And he said once he just was so fed up with losing that he decided in the middle of the race he was going to just row as hard as he possibly could for 20 strokes. You know, and you and I, we all know it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea because the boat is too heavy. One person can't accelerate 1.5 tons of human flesh, and so you can't stand out except by fucking up.
True story.
That's a really extraordinary feature of rowing, and you can, and the other there. So that's one huge element, that the fear that you're not gonna match what your team is doing, and that leads everyone, I think, to go into areas of effort that they would not ordinarily do. And the truth of that is borne out by what happened in Mexico City at altitude. I mean, it was a catastrophe. There were just people passing out, taken to the hospital in droves. It was scary. Boats were capsizing, but it was interesting. It was never strokes. Because if a stroke got in trouble, he'd just back off. But you can't back off when your stroke is still going. So your goddamn stroke drives you into trouble. Which leads me to Monk Terror, but sure, I'll tell the story. Let me just quickly tell you the story of Monk Terry, because I had fancied myself. I thought I had a shot at being the stroke of the 72 crew, and I'm glad I wasn't. But you know, we took off, and halfway through the race, we were dead even with 5 boats, and New Zealand had open water on us. And I remember thinking, are you kidding? That's not the word I was using. Am I racing? I trained 4 years to come in 5th. I was really pissed. I got into trouble in the third 500, which is a good sign. That's what you're supposed to do. You know, as a six man, you're supposed to lay it on the line. And by God, as we were approaching the 500, I was thinking very clearly myself, you know, obviously we're going to take it up at 500 to go. And I said, Monkey, if you take the stroke up, I'm going to come down and I'm going to beat the shit out of you. Don't you dare to, because I was in the hurt locker, and but he did, and of course I followed. You know, that's what you do. So that's my story about Monkey.
Well, and you know, I'm going to get you into more detail about that 72 race. But to me, it's really important. And like Steve said, it's, you know, we're trying to figure out this way to really help understand, because this is our archive. And a lot of it is, I always want this show to be fun and be entertaining, but also to inspire somebody, right? To
Yeah.
inspire them of what they can be. And so far, you've really showed that it's, the Olympic oarsman or the Olympic oarswomen sometimes starts from legacy, but sometimes start from nothing. And I'd really love to understand, for two phases of one is kind of when did you realize that there was something beyond not only what you experienced in high school, but what you experienced at Princeton, but like when did you first kind of pop your head into that national team level and, you're treading water and you're like, you know what? I don't care that I'm about to drown. I'm going to keep trying to swim. But I also think what's unique historically, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your crew in 72 was the first camp system for the US at that point.
Right.
So here you are going through this personal journey of starting the path to like, I think I'm good enough to be the best. But also at a time when it's like, and we're changing the whole paradigm. So can you take us a little bit to that, like both for Peter personally, but also what you were experiencing from the outside of like what was the system that we all grew up in that felt normal?
Right. Let me see. Okay, so freshman year, I was not a good oarsman. I spent the summer after my freshman year on a dude ranch in Colorado throwing hay bales, and I got very strong and I put on weight. And I came back and I got up to 218 pounds or so in the middle of my sophomore year. That was one thing. That felt great. The other thing I said to our coach, Pete Sparrock, I said, I think we can do something as a crew. I really think we can. I don't know why I said that. I said, I think I was just sick of Princeton just getting clobbered. And we were just the bottom. My freshman year, my boat came in 8th out of 12th as freshman. The junior varsity out of 16 boats was probably 14, and the varsity was 8 or 10. We were just getting schlocked. We'd go to these regattas and just get schlocked. And I hated it. I really hated it. So, and then a real turning point for me, my sophomore year, was coach sent us on a run. I don't know how far it was. And I beat everybody. And that was a huge surprise to me. And it surprised the coach. So I discovered that I had anaerobic capacity that I didn't know I had. And I stroked the Princeton varsity pretty much every day until I graduated. Now, stepping back, I remember talking to the headmaster of my high school when I was a senior. And I said something about wanting to row a single in the Olympics. He said something unbelievable. He said, "Why would you want to do that?" And I looked.
because he didn't think you were good enough, or because it's miserable to row in the single?
It wasn't because it was miserable. I think I just don't know. I don't know what he was thinking, but he had a single and we saw him rowing it. It looked like the most beautiful thing I ever seen. I said, God, I would love to be able to do that. So anyway, that sort of put the dampers on. All right, so in 1968, there was a camp. There were two camps. It was on the eastern and one on the west coast. Eastern Development Camp and the Western Development Camp, and ours was at MIT. We rode at MIT with Jack Fraley, was the guy who was really, actually he had started something in '64 at Lake Laconia. He tried to bring some people together from, the best from all different from the college crews. And I think they raced in the '64 trials. I can't remember, but anyway.
Did they just like put the call out and like just call around to the different colleges and say, who do you got? Send them up to MIT or how did that?
basically, yeah. And actually, Sparhawk, my coach, didn't push it. And this is crazy. I did it because I knew if I did, then I could get some of our guys to train in the summer, and that would help them the next year, even though I graduated. So I see, Olympics, great idea. I was already signed up to go into the frigging Navy, so I didn't expect, I really thought when I signed up for the Navy, I really didn't think I was going to live through my Navy. I was going to flight programming. There's a part of me, and I'm sure this was related to my brother, I really expected to die. It was very strange. I wasn't conscious, but when I look back on it, I know that was what's on my mind. So I talked to 3 juniors. Let's go up to the MIT and let's try this thing. And what was wonderful about it, and you all experienced this. I mean, Northeastern had this guy Mike McLaughlin, who coached at Princeton eventually, and he was the cockiest son of a bitch. We hated Northeastern. I can't tell you how much we hated Northeastern. They had these muscle shirts. They were the first one to wear muscle shirts, and they were so cocky. And we had something like 4 races with them that were a deck apart. We won some, and we just hated each other. And we walked into the MIT boathouse, and the first thing we see were these Northeastern assholes. It was just awful.
I know the feeling.
And there were guys, yeah, you do, don't you? And of course there are guys from all over. And inside of 4 or 5 days, we were having the most wonderful imaginable time. So
I know that feeling too.
That was really cool. I really, really loved that. So I was with this Princeton 4, and we couldn't develop any speed at all. It was very frustrating. So I figured this was kind of over. And then they said, well, Carl Ulrich was one of the coaches, and Jack Fraley said, well, we're going to bust up your 4. And that really pissed me off, even though we weren't going fast. And he put me in a pair with this guy, Gary Wright, who turns out is my second cousin. And we just beat everybody. I just couldn't believe it. And it was almost by accident. This is for the folks who don't yet know. So I had never raced in a pair before, and so the first workout was 5 3/4 mile pieces. It's a serious piece of work, and I didn't know how hard to row, and neither did Gary. So we just took off like idiots. We just rowed as hard as we could go. And we got to the finish line. We won by curvature. We just won by so much, and we both said, "Well, we're never doing that again." It was just too painful. But we turned around, we did it again. And we turned around and we did it again. And I realized you can row really, really hard and survive. And that's when I became a racer. It's sad that it didn't happen. Sad that it didn't happen 4 years earlier, but it was great.
But that's so powerful. I mean, I gotta stop there, because I think that's just really important to just not only the high performance mindset, but also like we've really started to establish, like, the difference is a high improving mindset. What really separates those that make it from those that don't, which is, one, you were willing to experiment. Like, as pissed as you were about your 4 breaking up, you got into this pair and it was like, I don't care. I'm going to use that aggression and apply it to this. You learned that you could go harder than you thought you were capable of, to the point where, like, we can't do that again. And then you repeated it. But also, like, there's that moment, right? Like, you just gave it to us. Like, when did you know it was different? And that you just said it, that's when I became a racer. And we talk about this often, about rowing's a racing sport. It's not a fitness sport. Like, fitness is important, but you got to learn, like, at some point you got to start racing. Right? At some point, you got to, like, not care about your heart rate, and not care about your lactate, and not care about your capillary count, and you just got to get ahead. And you just articulated so beautifully, like, learning that lesson, but the reward of learning that lesson. Like, I haven't heard we won by the curvature of the earth in so long, and it just brought back so many memories of both losing by the curvature and winning.
Well, you gotta understand. We won my junior and senior year. We won most all of our races except against Penn and Harvard, and they just clobbered us. And it was just so dumbfounding. I just couldn't understand how they could beat us by so much. But I want to go back and make one thing very clear. It was an accident that Gary and I rode that pair so damn hard. We didn't know what we were doing. And we just didn't know. So we just took off, and then we just kept going. And I remember I really felt at the end of that first piece, I said, holy, and we were both saying, this just sucks. This is so big. So it wasn't deliberate, it wasn't, oh, I'm really pissed about the Princeton crew or anything. It was just, it really was an accident, but we won by so much that it was really exciting.
And that's did that solidify 68 for you at that point, or was there a lot more to go to it?
Well, a couple of things happened that summer that were really amazing. One was Harry Parker had his great 68 crew that had just beaten Penn by inches. And he did something that still puzzles the hell out of me. He broke that 8 into pairs, and he sent them down to race against Gary and me. And we just schlocked them. And these are the guys that beat us by curvature. And if I were a coach and I sent 2 of my best guys down to race against these Gary Wright had been in the Princeton JV for most of the season, and they got schlocked, I would not send the rest of my 8 down there against those guys. There's something very strange going on there. It was really strange. He should never have done that.
Do you think part of it might have been because he knew that he was going to run a camp and he was trying to test the old method of like?
I think Parker, we can talk about Parker, but it's very controversial. I have some thoughts about it, but the fact is that 68 crew was destroyed by the time it got to Mexico. They had the most beautiful blade work you've ever seen. And I remember sitting in our boat, the Straight 4 in Mexico, watching them row by at full power. Kirk Canning, their 7-man and captain, was washing out the whole last half of the stroke. What the hell is going on? And they were undone. So that's when I began to wonder about coaching. I really began to think about it. Anyway, we raced against Huff and Johnson, who were silver medalists. No, they were world champions at the Nationals. So here we are, twerps, going up against the world champions, and we led them for 3/4 of the race. But the buoys had been sprinkled from a helicopter like salt on a table. There was no sense of lanes at all, and we got way off course. And I don't know that we would have beaten them, but we scared the hell out of them, and we were really frustrated that we screwed up our steering. So that was that. And then Parker came to us and said, look, got an idea. You guys can stay in the pair and race against Huff and Johnson. And I'm thinking, that's kind of stupid, because if we beat Huff and Johnson, then they're not going to make the Olympic team, and they're the world champions. I mean, I would feel bad for them, but I would be very happy to be on the Olympic team. And if they beat us, then we're out. So he said, let's just try a straight 4 and with his 2 spares, Monk Terry and Charlie Hamlin. And I took, we shoved off. Took first time we rode as a four. I said, wow, this is good. This is really good. And so we won the Olympic trials. That's the only race I've ever won that meant anything. How do you like that? And here's the best moment of that race. I want to tell you about this. We in that race we took off. Vesper was right next to us, and I love the straight fork. Justin, don't take this the wrong way, but it's so quiet.
That's okay.
There's something after having had coxswains all my life. There's something so intense about the silence in a coxless race when you get, especially fours, when you've got 6 fours going flat out and there's no noise. It was really intense. Anyway, they got a deck on it, and they held on to that deck. And then going into the third 500, one of them called up 2, and I'm thinking, wow, that's going to be hard to match, because we were, you were already racing in our race, and I said, so I just started bearing down, and I think the rest of the crew did, and so they moved a seat or two, and then they stopped moving, and I said, we got him. It was a wonderful feeling, and we got into the 500 to go, and I took it up 2, and we went through them, and my reaction was I was really pissed at them. Because as you could tell, they gave up. I wanted them to race right to the finish line.
Oh, wow.
I was really disappointed. I said, Frank. Excuse me.
We got duck quacks for that.
Totally fine.
I get that.
Your it will be Grand Crit approved.
Isn't it a strange reaction though?
No, I don't think it's a strange reaction.
It's
I
not.
think it speaks volumes about, to your point on being a racer, you want a worthy opponent, and you don't. To your point, Dan and I have talked about this a lot, and we've talked about it a little bit on the show, but I know Dan and I have had a lot of discussions about this. Like, winning by landslide margins is actually, it's great. It shows you have, dominant speed, but you want a worthy opponent. You want to fight for the win as a competitor, I think.
Yeah.
Versus just being like, this was a no contest. We won by 33 seconds, whatever it may be, something insane, versus being like, we won by 2 seats, and I remember every stroke because it was a battle, and I won the battle. And I think that's just being a competitor. I don't think that's a weird thing at all, Peter.
Yeah, no, I don't either, but I appreciate you saying that, Justin. I really do.
Yeah, when Dan and I talk about this, that's how you forget how many times you won the head of the Charles. Is if you have a row over, you kind of forget that one. But so Pete, like, I think, I'm hearing the story, and it seems like you had this, like, birth emergence almost, where you're like, you're suddenly figuring out, like, oh, I've been doing this all these years, and this is how you race. And then you're like going the whole summer like that, and you're going like I'm curious, just to like kind of like, move the story along a little bit. Like, was that, I guess, like, was the fine tuning of that skill, would you say like that was your edge that like kept you in it, even after you put the oars down for a little bit to go do the Navy thing, you come back, like was it like, was that racer's edge like the reason why you were in the boat, or was there something else, or not necessarily why you were in that boat, but what kept you in the boat, like that kind of edge that you honed that summer? Or was there something else that kind of was your thing, your superpower? Like, what was what became your superpower on this like national team journey as you're going through it?
That's a great question because I say my superpower is sleeping. I'm really good at that. I think, I've never, you really helped me, but with that question, see, because I think I never really thought of it until just now that what I really loved, I love feeling good about myself, obviously. It was, I needed something to balance out the whole feeling I had from complications in my family, and certainly with my brother, my bully brother. So certainly feeling good about myself and having people respect me for my ability to move boats was powerful. But I think what I really loved was rowing that pair with Gary Wright. I think the pair is the most fabulous boat. I just loved it. And, you knew every stroke you took. You knew whether he was matching you or whether he was out pulling you or not. And we were wonderful with each other because some days he just didn't have it. And some days he was pulling me all over the place. And we weren't screaming at each other. We didn't. I know pairs. There are pairs that do that, but we really rode well together as teammates. And I just loved that boat. I just loved how complicated the forces in it are. It's a bizarre boat. It's a stupid boat. It shouldn't even go straight, No, so I think that was very, very important. But after I should say that what happened in Mexico was in the semis, we were kind of a little bit behind Switzerland, and we were easily qualified for the finals. And I looked over and I saw that Switzerland was just a little bit ahead of us. I said, let's win this thing. And big mistake. I had no idea. And it pushed me over the edge, and I don't know what it did to the others, but I felt pain like nothing I'd ever felt before in my life. And it's not what you want to have before the finals. And so that was problem number one. Problem number 2, 3, 4, and 5 were when I got to the course on finals day, 3 coaches told me, whatever you do, don't go out too hard, because everybody was tanking. And I didn't go out too hard, and I went out way too not hard, and we were out of the race in 500 meters. And I just felt terrible about that. And so when the closing ceremonies and had this big sign up that said Hasta Munich, I said, I'm not ending on this. I can't end on this. I want to. So my entire goal, and people say, oh my God, go for the goal. I said, no, all I wanted to do was to deliver myself to the starting line of an Olympic finals, knowing that I was going to perform. That was my goal. And so it was kind of neat in 72, got to the starting line, and also to be in a crew with people I trusted. So it was kind of neat in 72. I got to the starting line, done. My goal was already, I knew I was going to perform, and I knew I trusted the guys. And it was just like, to me, it was like starting up engines and just seeing, which engine is the fastest, who's going to do what. So
it's a privilege to arrive at the starting line and be playing with house money.
Yeah. I mean, but I gotta know because it's like you gloss over it so quickly, and having got to talk to all 9 of you in the past, I just need to know, like, today's young cohort gets to watch, the Marvel and DCU comic book pantheons be crumble in front of their faces, right? Like it's so like go back to the comic book, stop looking at the movies. But we as a culture in America, we do love the team up, and we love the team up when it goes really well, and we especially love the montages. And I just look back at, I remember you telling me a story about a run where somebody rolled their ankle on the run, and somebody else looked back, you rolled your ankle, and somebody looked back at you instead of seeing if you were okay, being like, tough luck, and like started running faster to be because they knew you were hurt, right, or injured.
That's not quite right. I was running with Tim Mickelson, and we were running in Samaritz, and I hit a curb wrong, and I went down. I really thought it was all over. I really thought I'd broken my leg, and I stumbled down. And he turned around and he saw me go down. He didn't say anything. He just kept running, and I said, "What the fuck? Who would do that?" And that's just the way he was. Just one. He was just tough. And I was so angry at him that I got up and I ran after him, and I had no problem with my ankle. I'm sure the reason I had no problem with my ankle was I was so angry at him.
Adrenaline. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a crazy story. Yeah.
But that Kiwi crew that you raced, that wound up coming with gold, and you told me this, and I also hear it from some legends from the Kiwis themselves about, they were a monster team. But this cohort, like, you were the first Avengers of rowing, where it was like, let's take Iron Man and let's take Thor and let's take the Hulk from all the different places and let's bring them together and really try and squeeze a new level of international rowing for the US, because we were in the 8, to your point, that Harvard crew did not do well in Mexico. And it, after winning the 8 for every modern games from 1896 through to 1960, I believe, right? Vesper got silver, I think. And then
Vesper won the 64 Olympics.
It's 64. And so it was a big shock to this Rios Rowing CS to see the 8 not only not win, but not to
came fifth
to not even medal. And so the idea was, looking around, well, we know that some of these other countries in the Eastern European countries are privatizing their rowing teams and hiding behind the amateurism, because I think that's the really cool thing is amateur. You had to be an amateur back then, and they were skirting the rules.
Right.
So it was like, all right, well, let's put together the best of the best of the best. And like, what was that first experience like, getting into that camp and being around where you were seeing all the guys that you were once competing against and say, wow, I finally get to row with this group? Because I know, for not to make it too much about us, but we often talk about, that was the coolest part about going to Princeton, is like, I didn't have to race Luke anymore. I got to race with him. And the excitement of that, of, man, and it also ties into what you were kind of talking about, which is, you do get to the environment where you feel like steel is sharpening steel. Like, this guy's not even going to see if I'm okay with that roll my ankle. All right, well, I'm going to show him how tough I am with the sprained ankle. Like that environment, to me, is when it gets the most fun. And I think so often we do get, it's important to look at, like, yeah, there's a lot of obstacles that you have to overcome, and there's a lot of strife, and it is painful and it is scary. But once you're there, it is a lot of fun. And I feel like that's one of the things that the legend of your crew, because ultimately you guys did it, right? You came together as a bunch of individuals and formed a team in that summer. And that's what I would really love to learn more about, is how did you guys make yourselves so awesome to get to that line, and as Steve said, play with house money? Because what a beautiful moment to, one, full circle, do what you wanted to do, but also do what the U.S. needed you to do, and truly represent American rowing at that level again. So, if you don't mind.
No, it's an important perspective. Okay, I would say that the 68 experiment with the development camps proved successful. So the straight four was from the Eastern Development Camp, and the pair with was from the Eastern Development Camp. The four with came out of Penn, and they won their trials. So, there was evidence that this worked to get people together, and it was true. It was amazing when in our straight four we just clicked. It was just remarkable, and I'd never rode with these guys before. So I think that was proof that this thing could work if it was done right. So 72, my view was I wanted to row in an 8, and I had no interest in the trials because I'd seen what had happened to Harvard, and I didn't want to see the talent distributed. I wanted to see it focused. And they asked me what I would do if there wasn't going to be a camp. And I said, well, I'd shoot myself. So, and that, I won't have anything to do with it if we're not doing it. And I think a lot of people felt that way. Now, the irony, of course, is that 6 out of the 9 rode for Harry Parker, and Harry Parker was the coach. And one of the things that was critical about the camp was to see that a lot of people had questions about Monk Terry, because Monk came to the camp. He was not in shape. He was dying. He just had a baby. And talked to Cal Coffey about Monk Terry. Cal Coffey stroked the Northeastern crew and just a bull. I mean, he was a phenomenal oarsman, phenomenal stroke. And so Parker didn't take him, and it was made pretty clear that he wasn't going to take him. And whether that was because he thought that it wouldn't work, or that Harry just had this thing about Northeastern.
Well, those guys did beat him. Those guys did beat him in 72. So
they sure did.
And again in 73.
Anyway, what was important for me was to see Cleve Livingston at 6'2", 174 pounds, clobber guys you look at and say, well, this guy's a goddess. He can break an oar. And he would race against these really big guys and beat them in these seat races. And they'd switch back and he'd beat them again. And so the credentials of the guys who were in that boat were determined by seat racing that everybody saw. And that was essential. Now, it's funny, there were guys like Bill Titus, early seat racing, not at the camp, but at camp weekends on Warramog. And Bill Titus won 8 out of his 8 seat races, by 8 races, and Parker knew him and decided that he shouldn't be in the boat. And that was hard. So there's obviously coaching judgments that are going on. There were other people who did really well in seat racing who didn't make the boat. It's funny, you mentioned United States rowing. I was in the 71 crew in Copenhagen, the absolute worst crew ever to represent this country. We were so bad, we did not make the semis. I mean, not make the petites. But we must have ranked 14th or something. We were just slow as molasses. And I would be absolutely honest. I was probably the least effective oarsman in that. I think I was killing boats that summer. I had completely lost my touch. So my ambition in terms of the camp was entirely selfish. I was not thinking about the United States of America, especially after when was it? What year was it that they put the dream team together, the basketball team?
92.
92.
It was way later, yeah. But it's that all melds together. I just thought that was obscene. I just thought that was obscene. Well, here's my attitude toward American rowing, and you feel free to cut this; it's perfectly fine. So after our semis, we raced to make the finals, and so we stayed, a length ahead of the boat that was in fourth place. So we came in third, and after we put our boat away, I was walking across the apron. And this guy was yelling at me. Somebody on the other side of this fence was yelling at me. Who the hell is that? He's wearing a USA hat. So I walked over to him, and he just started berating me for not winning. And I remember, it was a moment like the moment in Calvin and Hobbes when Calvin's, his teacher turns into a monster, and he's just sort of, looking at this alien figure. And I was thinking, where the hell were you when I was running 6 miles every single morning? What claim do you have on me at all? If you want to watch and get a kick out of it, that's one thing. I appreciate it. But if the stands had been empty, I wouldn't have cared.
Right.
The greatest moment of that race, in many as I've gotten older, was sitting on the starting line with 5 other crews. And all those guys come from all over the world, trained their brains out to be there, and then to race together. And what gave it meaning, and this could be, my justifying the fact that we lost. But to me, the great significance of racing was the meaning that my competitors gave it. It wasn't just that we raced hard against each other. It was that each of us was racing. You just knew everyone was going to give the race of his life. And what an honor to be on the water. So what is 9 times? What's 9 times 5? 45 guys. What an honor to be on the water with 45 guys from all over the world who are just about to do that. It's just an incredible thrill. And I thought we could come in second. Yeah, I didn't think we could beat New Zealand. And New Zealand wasn't helping by taking open water on us either. So that's a long answer to my feeling about the USA. What I absolutely loved about the Olympics was being in the village, being in the dining room with people from all over the world, meeting all kinds of people, wonderful people. This guy, I love the story. I don't know how I met this guy. He was in Mexico, and there's this short African guy. He was about as wide as he was tall. And we started talking. He was from Togo. I didn't know what the hell Togo was, but we were talking. We talked, and then we said goodbye. And then 2 days later, I hear this. He calls me, Peter. Who the hell knows me in the Olympic Village? And this guy comes running up to me, and he gave me a dashiki. I've never forgotten that. I mean, that to me was just the most beautiful. It was just wonderful. And to me, I realized that the Olympics used sport to hold an international party.
So Peter, can I?
No.
If you don't mind.
Good. He's getting comfortable, baby. He's treating us like teammates.
I think what you said about obviously the final and basically it ties back to what we were talking about as far as worthy competitors
Yeah.
and there's no pushovers, right? And I think that even you alluded to it in the 68 race, like you went out too hard in the Olympic final, like it kind of it could bite you, right? Like or sorry, in the semi, and then the Olympic final, like it's the Olympic final, like everybody on any day could win that race potentially, right? At least everybody believes that. One question I do have, if you don't mind me asking, is because it was the Munich Games and you mentioned specifically the village, was there anything like in your mind, or was it completely like you didn't know what was going on with the whole Israeli contingent? Like, I'm just very curious because it's been like so dramatized. Obviously with where we are in 2025 and 20,
Yeah. Yeah.
but so I'm just in similar adversaries. But I'm just very curious as to like, were you guys are just like focused, you're in your bubble, or was it like, we know this is going on, we don't know a lot of information? I'm just very curious from an insider's perspective because it's been so recorded in history about that games, that village.
Yeah.
And obviously I don't want to take anything away from what you said about the race and your guys' accomplishments, but I do have a curiosity that I'd be
Absolutely.
remiss not to ask.
And they're making another Munich. They're making another movie about it too this year.
Yeah.
It's coming out.
Right. Justin, I really appreciate that. And I actually did a webinar for my college classmates, and it's called Rowing in the Bloody Olympics, because there was a massacre in Mexico as well.
Okay, got it.
And so rowing in the bloodstained Olympics was like we finished our rowing before the attack.
Got it. Okay.
So my wife Lori, who was not then my wife, stayed with me in the village, and I took her up to Hamburg, I think it was, for a flight home. And on the flight back, and this is again what I love about just international travel. I was in this train compartment with a guy. I don't know what language he spoke. He had a newspaper. I couldn't recognize the language. He was probably Eastern European. And the huge headlines that I couldn't understand. And he was trying to explain to me what was going on. I had no idea what it was. I remember as we were approaching Munich, he stood up and gave himself a bath out of a little alcohol bottle. And he took a swig and he offered me a swig. And I really wish, I can't believe I said no. I should have said yes. That's always been something I've regretted. Going into the village on the tram, there was an announcement that said this is the last train to the Olympic Village. And it was 6 o'clock. What the hell's going on? And I got there, and all these people were outside the gate and couldn't get in. And you may not know who Chris Taylor is. He was the heavyweight wrestler. There's a famous picture of him being lifted by a guy probably half his weight. Anyway, I recognized him, and he was standing there. I said, "What the hell's going on?" And he said, "Where have you been?" And we waited, and then the helicopters with the Israeli and the terrorists took off, and they were all dead 15 minutes later. So Stuart McDonald, who was the cox for the four with, saw the terrorists come in, but they didn't look like terrorists. He had no idea what they were doing. The village was permeable. So, but then, it was, I'm not going to pretend that I have the imagination to be Jewish and know what this meant, but the village just went icy. And it was tragic on so many levels, one of which was the Germans. I mean, every German looked as if they'd been hit with a cattle prod. And they were so unsure of what anybody was thinking or going to say or do. um, this was their bid to come back to the civilized world, and the Munich was all pastel colors and music, and and there were no hard ass uniforms. So I was asked. I got interviewed by 2 different television stations about just my reactions to it, and I blew the first one. I said, "Fuck, here's what I wish I'd said," and then I got interviewed again. So I got interviewed by the Danish television, and Gary Wright's fiance is Danish, and she saw that. But the closing ceremonies were surreal because almost all the teams left. I mean, if there was a team, all you needed was 1 or 2 people in the team to say, "Well, we're not going to do this. It's like we can't play a goddamn game after this." A lot of the individual sports continued, and so there are a lot of people still in the village. And I knew this was going to be my last Olympics, and out of pre-nostalgia and honoring what had happened and everything that had gone into the games, I decided I was going to stay in that village as long as I possibly, until they kicked me out, which I did. But that closing ceremony was so powerful, and I remember in particular this huge arc of these young, beautiful German women, girls in the dirndls, who were the hostess, and they all just looked shell-shocked. And I wanted to go up. I didn't speak German. I just felt terrible. It was horrible.
And I appreciate you taking us through that. I think that it's just really interesting, right? Because it's before, any of us were alive. And I think that the other thing is, again, it's been replayed and dramatized, and it's just a current, unfortunately, it's a current event. Even though it's literally, from 1972. So I think that it's just a really interesting piece that I'd be remiss not to ask. But to your point, I do appreciate the fact that, like, hey, you guys were wrapped, like you didn't really know it, and then obviously, until you got back, and then I think obviously that you were like, hey, I'm still going to live my Olympic experience. Makes total sense. I just appreciate you doing this, you sharing the story of like what it was like to be on the ground versus what it's like to be in, the Munich movie, with Ben Affleck or something like that, right? So I think that's just really cool. I think Dan was gonna flip the script a little bit, and we'll jump into another question. But I appreciate you sharing that story.
I'm glad to, but I was going to say, I wanted to say more about not specifically the attack, but what struck me so much about the village, and this is partly where some of my antipathy toward that guy yelling at me comes from, is that you never heard any of the athletes talking about what nation has the most medals.
Yeah.
That was all the media. All we cared about was being together as athletes, and we were all there to have our moment, to have the performance of our lifetimes. And that's all that mattered. And I would like to think that if the 72 crew had come in 6th, we would have rowed just as hard. We would have gone just as fast. And it would have meant at a really profound level, it would have meant just as much. If I felt that I, gone into the last 500 thinking, God damn it, monkey, don't you dare take up the stroke, because I'm going to die if you do. And he does anyway. That's the one other way we're looking at it is it, okay, so we had 16 crews in the 16 eights trying out for the gold. So we give out 3 medals. Everyone else should not have shown up. Why did you even come if you haven't got a chance to win? You shouldn't even be here. This is for winners. This is about winning. And if you're not a winner, you're a fucking loser. You know, that's the Newt Rockney, or that's Lombardi, Vince Lombardi. And I'm saying, well, what I'm thinking about now is watching the Eastern Sprints this past year, and there was a race. It was a JV heavyweight race for places 13 and 14. And these two, obviously not very fast crews, these two crews hammer and tong. The lead changed at least 3 times. And those 16 athletes were absolutely spent at the end of that race. And are you telling me that they shouldn't have gone because they didn't have a chance to win? What is going on here? What is going on? And I think what's going on is that rowing and other sports give people an opportunity to experience themselves up against a challenge that they would never imagine that they could face. And it can be in the 4th level finals. It doesn't. And I also, I'll tell this story. I was when I was at Noble and Greeno School, I was asked to help out with a cross country race. They had the championships for our league, and I sat there watching these kids coming at the end of the race, coming through the finish line. And I looked at them, and these were, kids, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. I said, none of these kids is hurting any less than I did in the Olympic finals.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the Olympics, right? It's the international hold my beer event, right? Like you're the best in your country, and you show up and you say, hold my beer, watch what I'm gonna do. and then you look at the crew next to you, or the whatever event you're in, right? And you say, what do you got? And it's a game of one-upsmanship. It's not crush the other. It's, here's what I'm bringing to the table. What do you got? Show off for me, and game respects game. And that's what's fun.
And if you've got something more than I thought I had, the fact that you've got it, I'm going to have to come up with it.
Yeah.
And so you drive each other to levels. So it's really a collaborative. It's a collaborative. Ironically, it's competitive, but it's a collaborative effort to achieve your very best. And that's why, as you said earlier, Justin, you don't want to win by 16 seconds. You want to go hammer and tong all the way down the race course. And and my friend Goldie and I were talking about what we would love to see is some way for, say, college rowing to recognize this. Say, we're not here to take your shirts. I depend upon you to row your best race. I want you to row your best race. And you want me to row my best race. And let's push each other to have the best race we can possibly have, and have a discussion about that beforehand. Get to know each other. It's just crazy how schizoid meaning, people aren't talking to each other. And I think the giving of shirts is the worst idea ever.
I love it. but to your point,
but it means if I beat you, so I'm going to humiliate you by taking your shirt, as opposed to
that's where I disagree. And before I disagree, because this show is meant for disagreement collaboratively, and it's also meant for what you just articulated so beautifully about your Olympic experience, like just getting there. One, you ooze Olympianism because you're defining what it means to go there and want everybody to put their best effort forward. So the best, and that's why world records are breaking there. That's why world records are broken at the end of the events where everyone's tired. They've had 3 or 4 qualifiers. It's why it's a peacekeeping mission. It always has been. It is the last conversation before we have to go to conflict. Which is why it becomes a target for what happened to you and your Olympic teammates. And I say not American Olympic teammates, but all of your Olympic teammates. Right. They made an attack on all of us. They took away our ability to show that we are there to show you how competitive you can be, and it has to go no further. You talk about that fan, the critic, who we all can't stand. Part of the reason why we are hosting this show is we're not interviewing critics. We're not interviewing people who've judged, who've never known what it's like to push themselves beyond the couch. They've never known what it's like to be uncomfortable. They've never known what it's like to be bullied and stand up to them. They've never known what it's like to accept your biggest competitor into your circle to become your best teammate. You and Monk, like the story of you two, from remembering what it took, him beating you in high school to him driving you forward in Munich. I mean, you really have just proven that we are all this part of this Ouroboros of time, this snake chasing itself. And I feel so honored to have sit in a boat on a different timeline than you, Peter, right now, because you really reminded me why I wanted to be an Olympian. Wasn't to win the whole thing. That would have been nice to have, but was to be there in that space, proving to the world that we could do it. We could go fast, we could get along, we could shake hands, and we could elevate the human species. And man, this has been so powerful to just be part of right now. It's been so amazing. It's been so humbling, but also so lifting. And you've had this incredible arc, and yet you couldn't stop trying to be the best. And you took this into coaching. You took this into writing. And I love that you and Goldie can't let it go. And I agree with you. We are not communicating enough in our sport right now to try and elevate it. If we all helped to try and make the slowest team faster, it would just make the whole thing better. It would just make the whole thing better.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And I really love that sentiment existed before us, and that we get to try and make it continue to exist together. And you coached, right? I'd love to know how you took all of this experience and you took your Olympic medal, you become part of this first camp, you bring back hardware to the US and the 8. And look, people always ask me what my favorite boat is, and I go, the 8. And they're like, why? And I go, it's just the most complicated experiment.
Yeah, it is really so complicated.
It's just it's a very complex problem. It's not, I shouldn't say it. It's a very complex team to get that many individuals to come together. And so, to your point, a straight 4 doesn't have the coxswain, it has a silence, but it's only 4 personalities in the coach. The pair is only 2, the single's only 1. But the 8 is 9 crazy people and a 10th from the shore yelling something. And then, so I think it's a symbol of when it goes well, man, look at how fast it goes. So if you want to go fast and far, you row an 8. And I'd love to see how you took that athlete experience and how you started to teach that. I don't want to go all into all your coaching career, but I'd love to know your coaching philosophy. What did you take from that experience? You went into the maze, you killed the Minotaur, you followed the string back, and now you're bringing this to the people you coach.
Yeah, I will answer that. But before, I have to say this because I'll forget it if I don't. There is a photograph I cannot find of the medal ceremony, or after the medal ceremony, for the single heavyweight sculler male, in which the bronze and the silver are holding the gold on their shoulders. And the children of all of these guys are up there with their arms around their father's massive legs. And it is, to me, I said, That's it. That is it. Nothing to me captured what it ought to be. As I'm here, these guys out there trying to kill each other, and the two guys who lost are holding the victor up in celebration of his winning. I mean, God, I just love it. Okay, so coaching. So I ended up at the Naval Academy because I was in the flight program in Pensacola. If you haven't seen An Officer and a Gentleman, you should, because that's what it was, except it didn't have that beautiful woman, God. So I discovered that I had no aptitude for flying whatsoever. In fact, the Viet Cong were desperately hoping I'd get an airplane because I would probably kill many, many Americans. And so I dropped out of the flight program, but I wasn't able to find out whether I was going to get drafted. So I called Carl Ulrich, who was the head coach at the Naval Academy, got my orders, and I coached there for 2 years. Now, my coaching philosophy, I didn't have one that I could have articulated then, but I now know that what it was very simple. I was terrified, and this ran through my coaching. I was terrified that I was going to take or be given the effort and the risk to self-esteem of all these athletes, all these young men, and fuck it up. So my entire focus was on doing whatever I could to help them become as effective and as fast as I could. And so my first crew, they won a couple of races, and then I think we had a practice with Carl Ulrich's varsity, and afterwards, Carl said, I think these guys are going to go the whole way. And it was you want to talk about an adrenaline shot, it was a raw terror, because I had never thought about winning. I had never thought about the Eastern sprints, IRA. All I was doing is just, what are we going to do today? What are we, and then the next day, what are we going to do today? And it really scared the hell out of me, because I said, my God, if they're that good, I could really fuck this up. So, really, I swear to God, that was my entire focus, was trying not to screw them up. And so I was fairly intense with them. We had a lot of fun. I was very silly. In fact, one of the great moments in my coaching career was, I think this second or third day, I after coaching, I said, what am I doing? It was so weird. And I realized I was imitating Harry Parker. And I said, I am not Harry Parker. And the next day I just became the silly goof that I am, and enjoyed myself. So that was a critical moment. I saw these kids, and it was particularly important at the Naval Academy because they're plebes and they're just being hazed. They're frightened. They're homesick. And a lot of them, they're thinking, well, I don't want to do this. And I really felt very like a mother hen with them. And Carl really set the example. And he was the most amazing coach. And that the guy had a birthday, he got a birthday cake. I'd never seen Pete Sparhawk give anybody a birthday cake. Harry Parker, are you kidding? Kidding? And so Carl was, and if somebody was ill, Carl was right there. I heard so many stories from these guys that I've just visited again about how he was there when they had something going on with their family. So it was a little different because I had the plebes, and I was really worried about them, and I cared about them, and they were just wonderful guys. That was another thing, here I am, big Princeton guy. Oh yeah, I said, well, these Navy guys, Chinola, they were just superb. And then I found out they all had to get an engineering degree. They all had to pass fluid dynamics. Are you kidding? They're wonderful guys. And I think Pete Sparhawk taught me to row well. He didn't have much of a psychological sense, and I think I did just naturally. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but I think I understood. I don't think I could have articulated, but I now understand that one of the things a coach has to do is to protect the athletes from each other and from themselves. So I had when I got to Nobles, I had captain go for a run. He destroyed his knee. He had a bad knee. He never told me. And if I had known, I would not have sent him on the run. But then you see athletes fighting with each other and picking at each other and interfering with his self-esteem that I'm trying to build. The reason they're there is to build their self-esteem. So, and you know, when people invest so much in a project, there's so much that can go wrong so easily. And I think as a coach, you have to pay really close attention to that and jump on it when you see it. And that was certainly the case when I picked up the Radcliffe crew. They were really in bad shape. If you want to learn something really interesting about group dynamics, look at projective identification. So, projective identification. I experienced some very, very strange phenomenon. These women were furious, and they weren't saying it. And they needed a target, and I was the target, and I became absolutely incompetent. I had already had 3 Eastern Sprint Championship crews in a row, and I couldn't coach. I got down. I was so terrified of that boathouse, and I saw it as a teacher. I saw really good teachers get completely undone by 1 or 2 students. It's really interesting, and I'm sure it happens in squads where you can have 1 or 2 guys who are just dangerous to the whole team. So I learned a lot. Boy, did I learn a lot. So what's my philosophy as a coach? Just try to give them, first of all, never lie. I just heard Steve Gladstone lie. Oh my God. He said to his seniors, what I expect is we go absolute at your limit every stroke you take. I said, Steve, that's just bullshit. You might be able to do that for 10 strokes, but if you're going to go 12 strokes, you can't do that. So you're right off the bat, the athletes are saying, well, you know, I'm being dishonest because I can't pull full power, you know, for 200 strokes. I can't do it for more than 10 or maybe 12, 15. What is it? So anyway, yeah, Steve and I have a long history.
We'll save that for episode 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing, this happened to me as a teacher, but I think it happened to me as a coach, and I never thought of it until now. As a teacher, I went through 3 phases. The first phase was I wanted to be loved by the kids. The second one was I loved the kids. And the third one was I wanted the kids to love each other. And it took me about 10 years to figure that out. So I used to, first class, I'd hand out these kids, they pick a name out of a hat, and I'd give them a piece of paper and say, okay, I want you to write a love letter to the person whose name you got. And I just freaked them out. And the guys, especially the girls, had no problem with it. The guys said, "It's just so awkward." I said, "Shut up and do it." I could, you know, when you're 50 or 60, you can get away with that. But I think that's what I did without realizing it as a coach, I loved it when they loved each other, and I think they knew that, and when they were concerned about each other. But what I did not like about coaching, because I studied counseling and consulting psychology at Harvard. What I didn't like about it, coaching, was you had so much power over their self-esteem. And this is true of guys. I mean, true of guys and women, but the women will tell you absolutely everything, but the guys wouldn't open up generally to me. And I felt that was not the kind of relationship that I particularly wanted. I wanted to be able to have access to helping people. And I think it interfered with my coaching. There was stuff going on for a lot of guys I just never quite figured out. So, and the other,
well, I think, yeah, but I think, but that work, right? That work that you're mentioning has opened it up to where we are. You know, part of that is this, I think, this show, and part of it is like bridging that gap to where sport, rowing, competition, it's time, you know, it's time to evolve, right? It's time to evolve. And I really appreciate you taking us on this. Like, your coaching philosophy really resonates with me. And I think it really resonates with a lot of people right now, where they're being told that they have access to, like, talk, seek out mental health, like, don't rely so much on yourself, don't be internal. And, you know, part of that is where sport really comes in, is also, but you got to try hard, right? You can't just let yourself become a victim to those emotions too once you share them. Like, it's about sharing them so you can learn to overcome them. And I really love that you brought that into not only your story, but brought that into how you started to develop coaching, because I think it opened up the path for other coaches to feel that way too. You know, and we're not there. I don't think we're there yet as a society in sport, right? There is still a lot of win at all costs mentality versus create champion mentality. Like, it's not about teaching people to win, it's about teaching them to get up. Always get up, no matter how hard it is. And it really resonates hearing you say that. I want to appreciate your time. You know, I want to appreciate that it is getting close to 11 o'clock at night.
wow.
And
Wow.
yeah, which is good. So I have.
Well, you
I
told
have
us you're an
one.
amazing sleeper, so it'll be no problem.
Oh yeah.
And I have, and we have kind of what our signature question is left, and I really want to save the time that we have left for that
Sure.
one, because I think this one is amazing, and it's really why I was excited to have you on, Peter, because you have perspective, you have wisdom. You know, one of the things that we do neglect in our modern culture is we don't respect the wisdom of the elders. And the nice thing about the Olympic movement and about being in this similar path is that there's enough empathy there where I really can't wait to hear this wisdom. But it's going to be a fun way for you to apply it to yourself, because here's our final question. If you could go back at any time in your life and coach yourself, when would it be, and what would you say?
Coach myself as an oarsman.
Any way you want. You get to time travel, baby.
This is not the answer you're gonna want. I've been thinking about writing a book about teaching and everything that I've learned, including the things that I just said to you. Because I would come home from a day teaching and tell Lori about it, and she said, "God, you know, you really should write this down. You should share this with your colleagues." And I had always had one reaction to that was, I don't think any of my colleagues who were brilliant teachers would ever do the stuff that I was doing. So there's that problem. But if I had taken everything that I've learned about teaching and given it to myself when I was a novice teacher, I couldn't have used it. I think the strange thing about wisdom is that it has its own schedule. You know, you can't make a 13-year-old an 18-year-old. There are mistakes that I've made. And if I could go back as, you know, as a coach, as a husband, as a friend, any number of times I'd say, you know, before you do that, stop a second, think. But you all know who Carrie Graves is, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
One of the last times I saw her,
She's for sure in Valhalla.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She's kicking ass. But she took over Radcliffe after I did. So, you know, I was with her a lot through that. But the last time I saw her was at the Crashby Sprints, and we did the whole, oh my God, what about being old? And I said something about, isn't it awful getting old? And she said, and I love her for it. This is pure Carrie. She said, I love it. I said, what do you mean? She said, I didn't know anything. I said, it's so wonderful to figure stuff out. And here I am, 78 years old. I am still discovering stuff about my wife that has been, if you look back, it's as if they're billboards screaming it at me. And the same thing about myself. It's just wonderful to keep learning and to get a larger perspectives all the time. Boy, I think I would have said 1,000 times through my life, don't be so hard on yourself. But I wouldn't have been able to make sense of that. I would not have known how to listen to that. One of my favorite stories about Karl Ulrich, who is one of the great men I've met in my life. Quick story about him. He, 17 years old, he joined the Navy, and his first deployment was on a ship that was bringing sex workers back from Japan, Korean sex workers. And his wife, Becky, who was fabulous, says she thinks that he spent the rest of his life trying to make up for that. And he did it by, you know, my typical Karl move would be driving by a work crew on a hot summer day, and he'd stop at a 7-Eleven, go get a whole bunch of drinks and hand them out to these guys. He does that. He did that every day of his life, that kind of thing. And so, and this will be my last part. I was talking to him after he just moved, and I said, how do you like where you're living? He said, it's great. And he said, da, da, da. And he said, and there's a church down the street. I said, there's a church down the street. I said, what denomination is it? He said, Christ, I don't know. Which is typical. I said, Karl, I know this may not be any of my business, but can I ask you, when you pray, what do you pray for? And he said without hesitation, please God, make me not be such a jerk. And I realized that only the jerks have no idea what jerks they are. But the good guys like Karl, all they can see is the mistakes that they've made. And I think that's true of you guys. That's what I think.
Oh man, Peter, what a way to close. To put us.
Thank you for this.
Put us in that
you.
company.
No, thank you.
Yeah. As we say to everybody, you know, this is just your first show if you want it to be. You have so much wisdom, and there's so many places we could have gone. And as you know, Justin was really funny. I sent him the bio, and he was like, I don't even know where to start with this bio because it's so much fun already. And I want to try and paraphrase something because I think it's really important, but I won't read it all. But I did ask Mariah a specific question, and said, "Thanks for his bio, but what's his passions from the eyes of you?" And she just highlighted some really cool things, like you refused to give her figure skates, but you got her pink ice hockey skates. You thrive on the celebration of authenticity, earnestness, character in humans, and you try to strive for it in yourself and fan the flames of others. You don't care about the popular opinion. You care about what's right. You're constantly working to make things fair. You hate the focus on accolades. And your attitude is hilarious and inspiring. She really wanted to make sure I mentioned that she really is proud of you for being the pink highlighter. And she wished she realizes how cool it was when you were doing it. So, Peter, thank you for coming on. You're a great man. You're a great treasure to rowing, to the Olympic movement. And we really appreciate you coming on to Fast Friends. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored. I really am. And I've learned a lot tonight. So thank you for that.
Well, you are always welcome. Always welcome. So, Fast Friends, Mettle Factory. Until next time.
That's all for today's show. Fast Friends is a Mettle Factory production. All opinions expressed are our own and those of our guests. If you like our show, follow along or subscribe with us wherever you get your content and podcasts. Thanks for listening.